Merci.
Give me a sec.
And wait for my action, and then you count to 5.
All right.
Introduce yourself.
Okay.
Lützeburg erlieft historisch Stonnen.
Teichwassergefahr bleibt groß.
Kein elektrisch méi.
Du Stonn wieder aus sauer aus ihrem Bett geklommen.
Lützeburg soll seg CO2-Emissionen bis Jahr 2030 op 0 aufsetzen.
Sie lösen net Laber. Nachdem Youth for Climate den 15. März über 10.000 Demonstranten Knödler mobilisiert hat,
Hatte gerne konkret Klang und konkret Mesuren an eine Diskussionsrunde an Echange geht, leider Gottes nicht durch für die Klimakrise zu bekämpfen.
My name is Valerie.
My name is Finn.
My name is Dewala Ellsworth. I'm 17 years old and I joined this project because of my good friend Valerie.
Schon am September auf den sozialen Medien von Merit schon erst ein Projekt gesehen. Und weil ich noch nicht so viel zu tun hatte, war ich interessiert und habe entschieden, zu kommen, für zu helfen.
Den Timothy mir im Juni letztes Jahr ungefähr eine Message geschrieben hat, ja, schreib dich da an, da kann ich filmen. Und weil wir angefangen mit Filmen in dieser Zeit, war mir ganz interessiert daran, wodurch ich mich dann hier angemeldet habe. Und rauskommt, dass es über Klimawandel geht, und ich das selber überrascht.
Die Idee von der ASTM von mir war, ein Projekt mit Jungen auf die Beine zu stellen. Und da ist die Idee gekommen, oder mir die Idee gekommen, das über das Medium vom Film zu machen. Das heißt, einerseits lernen die Jungen dann die Thematik vom Klimawandel kennen und andererseits lernen sie dann durch das Projekt auch filmen, wie setzen ich ein Projekt um, wie filmen ich eine Dokumentation, wie mache ich eine Recherche zu einem Thema. Wie man die Jungen zusammen hatten, sind wir direkt an das Thema herangekommen. Das Thema ist ja Klimawandel, das heißt Klimawandel zu Lützeburg, wie erleben wir den? Thema von der Responsabilität, wen ist responsabel für den Klimawandel, was tun die Länder im globalen Süden, um dazu dienen.
So in the first session we talked about climate justice and we played this game called the Cloud Game, which illustrates the CO2 emissions per capita per country. The results of this game was quite interesting to see where Luxembourg stands in the rankings of CO2 emissions per capita. We decided to play the game with other people of our age in the Jugendparlament. It was very interesting, a lot of great results, and people were shocked.
The Peters projection world map is spread out on the floor and the participants stand around it. Above is below. The unusual perspective encourages reflection on our view of the world. On the idea that above are so-called industrialized countries and below are the so-called developing countries. The clouds are placed on the world map with their names facing downwards. The cards with the country names are distributed around the clouds. Here you can see various clouds of different sizes. Each cloud represents the CO2 emissions per person of a country. The participants have to assign the countries to the clouds. So put the cards with the country names on the top of the cloud.
We'll give you guys some time to discuss your ideas, and if you decide it, you just take one of the names and put them on a cloud.
If we would all live like little Luxembourg, we'd need 7. So at least something I read, I do believe that's correct. So I'd say that Luxembourg is above the USA.
Okay, let's have a look at the results. Out of all the countries, Qatar ranks highest with 38.82 tons of CO2 emissions per person. Reasons for that are the fact that Qatar is a petroleum state. It is also a large country with a small population that engages in high standard living, and they also have a lot of cooling systems, which also has an impact on these numbers. Very similar to that, we have Saudi Arabia, which ranked second in the game, with 18 tons of CO2 emissions per person. As surprising as this may sound, Luxembourg ranks third and follows right after Saudi Arabia with 16.31 tons. The reasons for that are the high standard of consumption and living, for example, owning 1 or more cars per household and living in big houses. Another factor is the transport sector, which is also linked to the petrol tourism. Mind you that the air travel is not included in this number. And now let's compare to countries with lower emissions, such as Ecuador, which is one of the poorest countries in South America, 2.15 tons. Then we have the Philippines, which is one of the most densely populated countries in Southeast Asia, with a total of 1.39 tons. It is rather low compared to the other countries, and yet they are severely affected by climate change. Last but not least, we have Burkina Faso, which is one of the 10 poorest countries in the world, with 0.179 tons of CO2 emissions per person.
They had quite a lot of knowledge already, especially in comparison to when we first played the game, which was to be expected from the Youth Parliament. In the end, they also discussed about what could be done and other important things where we learned something new and which we found pretty interesting.
Well, fair is quite hard to define in a sense. What we've been lucky in as Europeans, as Americans, is that we've had a long time to industrialize. Whilst we did so, we became stronger than the rest of the world, and as at the time, and partially still today, the world was conquered by the strongest, we conquered and we used the materials which we took from others to strengthen our industrial base. That base is now what we can fall back on. Those resources which we took from others and in partial places still are taking today, just got to look at operations of Total in certain countries, mean that these countries don't have the economic base to fall back on. So we have the pillow in case anything happens, a crisis, we can spend funds, we have the economic potential to fall back on, others don't. So is it fair? Probably not, but in the end, if it's fair or not won't change the outcome. I'd say that what will change the outcome is a change of perspective and potentially also funding, helping the countries which are in need and trying to give them alternatives and trying to, in one way or the other, save them what is happening and save humanity as a whole.
While researching, we've decided that we would like to dig deeper into the topic, so we invited an expert from Luxembourg called Magali to answer our specific questions.
I'm Magali Paulus. I work for CEL, which is the transition movement here in Luxembourg. We try to work with citizens to give them the necessary tools to go towards this transition that we need to go out of fossil fuels, determined society into a renewable, just and fair society.
In your opinion, what should people know about climate change in Luxembourg?
So in Luxembourg, all the citizens, everybody who lives here, and all the companies that are registered here, we have a huge responsibility towards the climate and the impact that the climate change has. When you look at, for example, this individual ecological footprint, these calculations, the individual footprint of a Luxembourgish person, like a standard Luxembourgish person, is 7 to 8 planets, which means that we need, in order to sustain our lifestyle, we would need 7 to 8 planets to continue living the way we do. And this happens on behalf of populations in the global south who use less fossil fuels, less everything, actually. So climate justice is actually to get those countries and people who are most responsible for climate change to account for that responsibility and mainly to pay also for this responsibility. For example, 1% of the richest in the world, they emit as much carbon emissions than 66% of the poorest. So you have 1% that emit as much as 66% of the world's poorest. So you see there's a big balance that needs to be found, and that's what climate justice is about. The first thing to be done is to realize the responsibility we have. The responsibility we have towards people in the global south who are directly affected by climate change, the responsibility we have also towards population here in Luxembourg that has less means to fight climate change, for example, who has less time also to get involved, for example. And then from there on, to deconstruct actually all these narratives that we hear in mass media, that we hear from our political the decision makers, from the big advertisement companies. So to deconstruct all these narratives and to bring in another narrative, and also to stop, because all this climate change can bring a lot of fear and anxiety. And I think we need to surpass also the fear and the anxiety and get active. And when we are active with more people, I think the fear can go away, and we feel powerful. And I think it's about empowering people and taking this power back also as citizens, as young people. Because we see that our political decision makers, they are irresponsible. They are totally irresponsible, and they need to face also their responsibility. And sometimes we need to show them also the responsibility that we have, but to do that in joy.
After interviewing Magali about climate change and climate justice in Luxembourg, we discussed the topic, and it came up that actually Diwale and Leslie are from the Philippines and have their own experiences regarding the issue. And since ASTM has partner organizations in the Philippines, I decided to contact them, and they gave me the contact of Alap Bairoso, one young climate activist from the Philippines, and we did an interview with her.
Hi everyone, I'm Alap Bairoso. I am the National Coordinator for Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines. It's the Fridays for Future of the Philippines. We're an alliance of youth organizations that are based in the Philippines and whose main advocacy is for climate justice.
So when did you start to realize the impact climate change was having on you while living in the Philippines?
So I only started becoming more socially aware about the impacts of climate change when I started becoming more aware of the social issues. So that's a part of that is poverty. A part of that is the class differences that we would see in the Philippines. And that made me realize how different someone from the Philippines who would be more privileged and someone who are more impoverished would be affected when it comes to the effects of climate change and when it comes to flood.
So it's not even equal between countries, but also inside countries, right?
Yes, exactly. It's the social class is a huge factor. Your social standing, your economic capacity is also a huge factor of whether you can adapt at all to climate change.
Mm-hmm.
I came from a background of a family of activists. So my father is unfortunately a victim of enforced disappearance here in the Philippines, which is a grave human rights violation because he was an activist himself. So I've been exposed to these issues of society from an early age, and I've been encouraged by my family and friends to stand up for myself and talk about these issues openly.
So do you have the feeling that a lot of young people are interested in these topics in the Philippines?
It's our reality as well. It's not just because we're interested or we're curious about these issues, but because we have our own personal histories, whether that's our families or our community that we live in, which makes us so adamant about advocacy.
Mm-hmm. For you, it's reality. It's happening right now. No.
Exactly.
We come to the next question, which is, how does you being Filipino influence your climate activism?
I feel like I would repeat myself earlier if I said that it's because it is our reality. But I think particularly with climate activism, I think it's because how I said how normalized typhoons are, how normalized flooding is, how normalized suffering when it comes to drought and like the food insecurity, it makes me want to do more about climate work, because the cause of that suffering, the cause of those typhoons and the worsening effects of climate change isn't particularly Filipinos. It's not our country who are the greatest emitters of carbon. It's not going to be enough to change the status that we have of having to adapt to climate change. It's not just about mitigating it anymore. It's about surviving. What will happen if the sea level rises too much, and then there'll be entire islands that will be drowning. So it's a matter of survival, and I think that really, would push you to how much you would want to fight for a better world. The fact is, again, we have our whole lives ahead of us. It's our future that's at stake here, and I think because we have that ability to look into the future, our ability to see what's in front of us, we have that chance to want to change what's happening right now. And I think that's why it's so important, because we're the ones who's going to live that life, right? So it might as well have a good life in the future.
So what would you tell a Luxembourgish student who is interested in the issue of that topic?
One of the amazing things of being a student and being young is that we have so much time in our hands. We could use that to educate ourselves, learn more about the issues, not just issues within our own community, which is important, but also issues outside of our community, like, touch grass and see what's happening in communities. If that's possible. If not, at least this whole internet is out there to read up on and learn more, watch videos about things happening all over the world. And then the second step would be to do something about it. It's not just like you knowing everything, and then that will, help. That won't also help you, because that could be like a burden if you're only gonna keep that kind of feeling to yourself. You can join organizations, and that can be in the different forms of whether it be like in your student council or an advocacy organization within your school, or even outside of your school if that's allowed, or start your own organization within your community. I think it's great to find people that you have the same interests in, and you have the same advocacy for, or you want to see the same world in the future together. And I think that's where action will matter, because you're doing it collectively. You're not just doing it by yourself. You're not just doing it for yourself anymore. You're doing it for people outside of your bubble, outside of yourself. And I think that's a good place to start.
Menger Meinung war de Projekt extrem lehrreich und ganz interessant, auch am Bereich Film habe ich auch vieles beigelehrt. Und ich muss ganz ehrlich sagen, das war extrem impressionant herauszufinden, wie schlimm Lützeburg wirklich im Vergleich zu der Welt steht.
Auch die Erlebnisse, die mir erzählt wurden, ich hatte nie gedacht, dass der Klimawandel so Schulden gibt. Also, schon nie wirklich darüber gedacht gehabt, hallo, die nächste Mal, wenn ich dann etwas möchte, dann habe ich das immer noch am Hinterkopf hängen.
It's a very big issue right now, and I think that it's a really good opportunity to learn, and I think I did learn during the course of this project.
Fand es immer ganz einfach, sie alle zusammen zu kriegen, aber es hat wirklich Spaß gemacht. Und sie haben auch oft einfach eine ganz andere Sichtweise auf Sachen oder ganz andere Fragen, die in sich vielleicht selber gar nicht stellen. Und das war eben flott, da zusammen zu gucken.
Ich meine, das hat auch eine gewisse Motivation geführt, für wirklich weiter sich mit diesen Sachen auseinanderzusetzen und einem seinen eigenen Konsum zu hinterfragen und in dem Moment auch darüber nachzudenken, wie reflektiert mein Beholen sich auf den Rest von dem Ganzen und wirklich so zu realisieren, dass du nicht verrennen musst, dass du wirklich musst du Verantwortung haben, egal bei eng Position mal anholen, ob et lo führen der Kamera aus oder an der Kamera an dem Sinn.
Hoffentlich schuldet ich dann an weil das wichtig weiter geht an stay tuned.